Hey guys, Parfax here. Today we are bringing you a new world attribute guide. All right, let's get started. So I'm here on the New World Reddit and I was scrolling through it a couple days ago and I saw this post. Now, I didn't originally make a video about it, but I was thinking about it this morning and I'm like, man, this information's so good, I think I need to get it out to you guys. So this is a Reddit post by Perform71, and it is a great guide to everything when it comes to attributes. Now, I haven't 100% checked each one of these. There's a couple little mistakes that I've seen that I will point out. There's no way for me to actually go in the game and check it. You know, I don't want to really check it on another website, but this is a great post to show you everything that when it comes to attributes. So let's get started. The first one's going to take a little bit longer than the rest of the attributes because we're going to go over a lot more in the first one to show you how everything's laid out. And all right, let's get started. So we're here on strength. So here's essentially how everything is laid out. First, we have our bonuses. These are essentially once you get 50 points into strength, you will get this bonus 100 to 150, 200, 250, 300. And then we have our primary attributes. So these will all be the weapons that scale off of that specific stat. And then the smaller ones will be the weapons that scale off of it as a secondary stat. Then we're going to have the gems that correlate for the most part, whatever you're trying to do typically in strength or whatever armor or whatever attribute we're going after. We're going to have armors that give that specific attribute. Some more basic gems, damage effectiveness, which we'll talk about here in a second, and then foods that actually give that resource. First, we'll talk about the damage effectiveness because this is going to be something we talk about once and kind of leave alone. And if you didn't know, your different abilities or your different weapons, they actually deal different types of damage, and each one of those damages has a plus and a minus when it comes to how effective they are against different mobs. So we have Ancients, Corrupted, Angry Earth, the Lost, and Beast. So whenever you see one of these symbols, it'll mean your weapon is less effective against that type of mob. As you see, like the little down arrow. It'll also be something that you will see on your screen when you hit the, the person. Let's say if we hit an Ancient with a slashing weapon, you will see a down arrow, and it'll have like this color of actual text for the damage you deal. If it's white text, then it means you do equal damage to it, so you have a base scaling. And then if you see this up, it means you do more damage to that enemy. So you can kind of go through here and look to see what weapon you're using and to see if it does good or bad damage to whatever mob you're doing. This could be something to where if you're doing PvE especially, you might want to have two different damage types so that you can actually deal better damage to whatever mob type you're doing. For instance, maybe you don't want to have two thrusting weapons against these mobs, or you might not. Let's see the Angry Earth. You might not want a thrusting weapon and a lightning weapon, for instance, because then when you go against Angry Earth mobs, they are going to take less damage from you. But to be fair, it's going to be hard to get. Sorry, that was my phone. It's going to be hard to get a weapon type that is going to have, no downsides. So you're going to do less damage against some mobs, but it's a great tool for you to see exactly what you're doing. We're not really going to touch on this anymore, but I hope you guys, get really good use out of this. So first, we're going to go off when it comes to our attributes. We're going to talk about all these points here to the left, and these are essentially what you will find in your attribute tree, and these are going to be the specific bonuses. What we're typically going to do after this page is we're just going to go over what I believe is the most important threshold to hit, and you can read all these if you want. We're not going to go over each one of them, but we are going to go over at least a point or two of them. So when it comes to strength, I really do think you need to get to at least 100. The 10% damage to melee weapon heavy attacks is pretty insane. That is a very big damage. Obviously, the 50 is pretty insane too. That actually increases your heavy attack damage as well. The rest of them are pretty good, and obviously you want them. But I think that 100%, that 100 point right here is probably the biggest one to get. Then we have our weapon scaling. Now we'll talk about how they scale. If you see here, you'll have three different scalings you will see on the weapons. You'll have 0.9, 0.65, and 1. So what this means is essentially 0.9 means it scales at a 90% rate, 65%, and 1 means it scales at a 100% rate. Now, the only weapons that are going to scale at 100% rate are going to be weapons that don't have a secondary scaling stat. So that just means that if you're going a straight, strength stacking, Great Axe can be the best, or at least get you the highest scaling percentage along with Warhammer, so on and so forth. But just because you have a sword and shield that scales 90% in secondary set dexterity, you can even pump some things in there like strength and dexterity when it comes to your food and stuff like that to kind of make up for the fact that you don't get 100% scaling on it. But the scaling isn't super, super important. Some of the most busted builds were actually focus scaling weapons that have a focus gem in them, which scales at, I believe, 60% rate. I would have to look at it specifically. I don't see any on this page. I don't think they actually put any of the scaling gems on here. But I believe it's a 60% pace. So even, though they scaled at 60%, it's still pretty insane. And the most busted builds were actually running the focus scaling. So scaling, I wouldn't worry about, going with the Great Axe over the Sword and Shield for the sole reason because it has a 10% higher scaling. That's not a big deal. The weapon themselves the scaling's not that big of a deal. Yes, obviously you're going to get a bonus, but it's not that big of a deal. So every weapon here, you'll see we have the Sword and Shield, Great Axe, Warhammer, Hatchet are the primary scaling strength users. And then we have the Spear for the secondary strength with the Dexterity as its main scaler. We're not going to go over too many of the gems. You can kind of see them down here. You can kind of zoom in if we want, taunts, which is more of a focus thing, amber, stuff like that. You can kind of look on here if you want. We're not going to go over them. But the two biggest things for people to note are the armor and the food. So the armor, this is just going to give you all the armor that actually scales, or at least has these different attributes in them. So we have all, the primary stat strength, secondary constitution. If you look, it's not going to be the same as these. It's not going to give you 24/16 depending on your tier, or it might actually be that exact. I would have to go back and look. But it's going to be similar to this where for the primary, let's say strength dexterity, you're going to have somewhere like a ratio of 24/16 is typically how it goes. And then strength, it'd be like the equivalent of the 40. So they essentially scale the same way. I don't think the highest tier is 40 strength on the armor. I would have to look, but it is pretty big. So you're going to want to get these. It's pretty insane. These are just a great resource for you to look, if you're doing a strength intelligence for some reason, armor of the spell sword is, what you're looking for. Next, we'll look at the food, and this is going to be very self-explanatory. It's the only time we're really going to talk about it. But if you're looking for specific food to scale your strength or constitution or intelligence, like I said, you'll find them over here, and this will give you all the food that scales it. Pretty cool. Next, we're going to go to constitution, and the most important thing here is I believe everybody should get this 50-point passive. I know the guild that I was in, some people weren't even hitting the 50, and I think, in my opinion, that is just completely wrong. I think the only way that you do not care about hitting this 50-point passive is if you are a PvE person who always runs in a group and always has a healer, and they never have to actually heal themselves with a health potion. If you are running health potions, if you are using health potions, I believe this 50-point passive is an absolute must. If you look at these ratios, you don't start getting these higher percentages until you get down to the 200-point tree. Now, I know this isn't giving you any base stats, but 20% stronger health consumables is absolutely insane. It is what I rush when it comes to PvE. We'll have a PvE video on the best ways to actually do PvE, because there actually is a pretty easy way while you're leveling to just base roll most PvE content. But this 50-point passive is insane. It's giving you health along with giving you the consumables, 20% stronger health consumables. It's absolutely insane. And if you are a melee user, I think you must have 100. And I say that because you're going to be typically wearing medium/heavy armor. So that'll give you a big bonus when it comes to this 100-point passive for the Constitution. And it's absolutely crazy. It is great, 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 great. I cannot recommend these 2 points enough. Obviously, you keep going down there. They're all great. They make you super tanky, but are pretty cool. Now, when it comes to weapons, we don't actually scale anything off of Constitution. So they just basically put the tanking weapons in here. We have our armor, our food, our gems, all that good stuff. And they just put the taunt and gem down here because Constitution is typically tanking. Next, we have our focus, and as you can see, we only have one focus scaling weapon, which is the life staff. Now, I think when it comes to focus, if you're a healer and you're scaling focus, obviously, you want the 150 point passive. I think that is the biggest, you know, attribute point spot here. Most of the ones that I'm going to tell you about are either the first or the second, but that 20% healing output is absolutely insane. Even if you're going a tanky healer, I think you need to get to the 150 point passive here, because if you're in your group, and even if you're wearing, you know, heavy armor or stuff like that, you really still need to get that 20% healing output. Is absolutely crazy. You have to get to that point. I don't care what build you're doing, you need to get to that point if you're a healer. And then obviously we have, like I said, our weapons, the gems, armor, foods, all good. Next we have intelligence, and the only two weapons that scale off of intelligence as their primary are only weapons that scale off of solo intelligence. They don't have a secondary scaling, is what I'm basically trying to say. That's the Fire Staff Ice Gauntlet. And when it comes to intelligence, I really think you do need to get down to that 150 point. The 200 point is really good, and the 100 point is where I would shoot at first, because that 10% crit damage is absolutely insane. But once you get past 150, I really don't think you actually need any more intelligence. So even on your biggest builds, I don't think I would scale much past 150, because 10 mana after a dodge and 30% duration of damage over time spells isn't that impactful for how many points you have to spend in it. I know you do have a mana issue when you're doing intelligence, like if you're doing Fire Staff Ice Gauntlet, which I ran a little bit. It's pretty mana intensive, but once you get to the point where you're actually getting up to these higher numbers, you're actually going to have some things in the trees to really substitute the lack of mana regen and stuff like that. So once you get to 150, I don't think you really need to go any farther in intelligence, but that 100 point passive is absolutely insane as well. And then finally, we have the Dexterity tree. The Dexterity tree also has the most amount of weapons, and the Dexterity attribute threshold's a little bit different. Obviously, the 50 is pretty insane. The 100's really good too. But in my opinion, you actually need to get to the 200 is the best spot for the actual attribute points on the Dexterity. You want that 10% bonus backstab and headshot damage. Now, not all the weapons are really going to utilize both, but imagine, you know, you run in a bow, you definitely want that headshot damage. If you run in a rapier or a spear, you want that backstab damage. So these are all insane. Now, this is probably the weapon that is going to scale Constitution the least, in my opinion. Now, some people are going to argue maybe intelligence, but unless you're a rapier or a spear user, you're probably going to go super heavy into the Constitution tree as well. I'm sorry, unless you're a rapier or a spear user, you're probably going to just go mainly into Dexterity with a little bit of Constitution. Now, everybody's going to be a little bit different. The meta typically does favor going heavy into Constitution, which I agree with, because it makes you very much, you know, very tanky. Even if you're a bow user and you want to get all the way up to, you know, the 250 or the 300, right? You still actually want some Constitution, because just because you are fast, nimble, doesn't mean, you know, if someone comes up to you and they get one good combo off, you want to be able to die, right? You want to still have Constitution. But the Dexterity tree is probably the most glass cannon out of all the trees. You really want some of those really high points. They really give you value the higher up you go. Now, I may make a video on where I think maybe some of these points should be located. That could be kind of a cool video to put out. But I just wanted to give you guys this resource. We're going to put the link to this post in the comments or in the description down below, so you guys can go ahead and click on it. It's great. I've loved this resource, this thing. If you look... some of the weapons, I think it was, yeah, the intelligence here says hatchet, sword, and shield. It's actually rapier, musket. These are just the wrong wording. I don't think any of the other ones are actually wrong. No. But the intelligence here, this is kind of the mistake I was talking about. It actually is the rapier, musket, not the hatchet, sword, and shield. They have the right icon, they just don't have the right wording. So keep that in mind. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Parfaxgaming, where you're going to have some huge things coming up on Twitch, especially around the launch of New World. So we're going deep into New World. I have, I'll be playing some other games. Until then, when New World launches, we are going absolutely crazy. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me know in the comment section down below what you liked, what you didn't like. Let me know if you've seen this post. Let me know if you knew all about the scaling, the food, the armor, all that good stuff. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.